So this is Vlogmas. Hello and welcome back to Vlogmas. Today we're focusing once again on true gifts, and in this, the final Sunday during the Lenten season, our emphasis is on the true gift of love. We know that God is love, and from God are all manifestations of love in our life, whether that is the love we have for family members and the love of our parents, siblings, extended relatives, love for friends, love for um, uh, our romantic relationships, spouses and significant others, partners, all the love that we have, love for our neighbor, and love even for ourselves. All of that love comes from the God who not only shares love with us, but who is love. And one of the things that I know about love and really promoting the increase and spread of love of God's love in the world through us and in us, is that often um, I'll get some pushback and people will talk about justice as sort of something that's opposing love, that's the opposite of love. And the fact of the matter is that justice is a manifestation of love. That love um, doesn't mean giving people a pass. It doesn't mean not holding people accountable for their actions, their behavior. In fact, love, real love, true love, does all of that. It seeks to make us better. The scripture talks about ironing, sharpening iron. One friend sharpens another as iron sharpens iron. And in that process of iron sharpening iron, there's friction, there's tension, um, there's conflict and confrontation. That's part of love. It's the manner in which it's done. It's the purpose and the motivation behind it. It's our attitude and disposition towards the person. Often, when we think about accountability, and justice, many times that's couched in the idea of revenge. Um, someone getting their just desserts. Well, that's not necessarily what grace is. Grace is actually not necessarily getting what you deserve, but receiving God's covering in that situation for it. And we can sometimes think that those two things are at odds with one another. But we tend to want grace for ourselves, even if we don't want to extend that same grace to one another. I often talk about, everyone wants grace for themselves, but justice for everybody else. Well, if we conceive of grace as a true value, we don't get everything we deserve, where we receive God's favor despite who we are and what we do. That doesn't preclude still making things right when we have done wrong. When we have injured and caused harm, we can still make things right. And that's part of love. And helping one another to live accountable lives is also part of love. So I tend to be pretty engaged in the political process. And some people think that pastors aren't supposed to do that. I think as a pastor, I don't think that churches should be partisan. And I think that if a pastor is affiliated with a party, I don't think that's necessarily wrong to be affiliated. But I don't think you can have blind allegiance to any person. I think that our ultimate allegiance is to Christ, and nothing can supersede that. And our and God is the one who is sovereign, and so who rules and reigns? It's not a person. It's not even a nation. It is God, and then all those other things come below that. So I think you can still love your country as I do, and you can still be engaged in community and in politics and in all those things to help bring about God's justice and peace into the world through those means. I think you use the means of the time to do the work of the Lord. But in this case, to do it out of a spirit of love and not animus, so that I don't hate people who disagree with me. I'm open to hearing what they have to say, open to finding some places of commonality and some places of agreement, and to build on those things. I'm not looking for a fight all the time. I'm looking actually for consensus, and I'm looking for the opportunity for healing and restoration and reconciliation. But at the same time, I believe that pursuing the true gift of God's love means that that extends to everyone. And I do think that means when Jesus talked about what you did for the least of these, you did for me. And for me, that is the ultimate expression of loving my neighbor. It's not just being nice to people. It's what I've done for others is what I'm doing for Christ. And if I put it in those terms in my mind, so I think about it that way, then that helps me. I'm not always perfect, trust, but that helps me to, when I want to lash out of my pain or disappointment or just despair at the state of our world sometimes, and just being honest, I too can have those feelings. How do I get out of that? Is thinking that it's not the person, it is evil in the world, and the ways in which that evil in the world can separate us from one another. Also recognizing that none of us is always right, even when we stand on very sure footing and understanding and on the strength of our convictions. There's always some place where I need God's grace in the situation. I'll be honest with you, oftentimes I'll go back to what I like on Twitter and I'll think, no, well, this part of that, no. I might agree with the overall idea, but the way this was stated, I probably should. Is that the witness? Is that the witness to the world that I'm trying to put out there? Is that a witness of love? I've said, I think before in one of these vlogs, that I follow B. King on one of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughters on Twitter. And she does such a great job. And she's so inspirational to me, following her and how she can talk about God's justice. That beloved community that Dr. King talked about was love and justice together in concert. There's no conflict in that. In fact, the two have to go together. And if you've never read anything by Dr. King and you're looking for something to read, my recommendation would be to read his book, Strength to Love. I think I have a copy of it here. I do. Strength to Love. And Strength to Love is such a powerful book. I read this for the first time in seminary, and it's a collection of his sermons, the sermons that he preached. He would preach in preparation for the acts of protest that they did in the movement. And so he would build the people up theologically and spiritually and undergird their understanding of what it meant, what it meant to be loving while pursuing justice, that enabled them to stand in front of fire hoses and to confront possibility of the police dogs coming after them. You know, we have a tendency to look back and sanitize the legacy of the civil rights movement. It was a violent movement. There was a lot of violence. It was a non-violence. He was a proponent of non-violent resistance, but there was a lot of violence towards them as a movement. And really we're talking about physical violence. But there was also spiritual violence. Terror was directed at them. And yet the witness of Dr. King and those around him in the movement was a witness of love. And I think now about John Lewis, the great congressman who still witnesses to the importance of love and justice. And so you might think, well, what in the world why are you talking about justice during Advent and leading up to the last few days before Christmas? Why did God come in the world? I think we can think that Jesus came into the world for our individual salvation. I think that is too limited, too narrow a view of the breaking in of Christ into the world. Christ came for Christ's kingdom to come, for the rule and reign of God's shalom, God's peace, everything as God intended it to be realized on earth as it is in heaven. Jesus comes and is with us, not just so that we can individually feel good and pray to God and have our lives be better. That's part of it, but it's not the totality, and we do a terrible disservice to our faith and to the witness of our faith and what we're called to witness to by having this narrow vision that our faith is about individual salvation. Our faith is about on earth as it is in heaven. And that's God's love being the prevalent and predominant force in the world against which nothing else can stand. You know, I've been in preparation for our Christmas Eve service at church. We're doing a version of Lessons and Carols. I'm calling it Word and Song, but we're basically reading scripture and singing Christmas carols is the vast majority of the service. And I'm focusing on John 1, Gospel according to John, the first chapter. The beginning was the Word, and so on. And it goes from this big view of, you know, Jesus was in the beginning. So during creation, Jesus was there. Jesus didn't just come into the world, didn't enter in when he was born, but Jesus is part of creation. And sometimes we don't think about that because we think of the Father as creator, Mother, creator, but all the Godhead, the Trinity, part of creation. That's why it says, let us make human beings in our image. And so it starts with this big view to really claim the divinity of Christ, not just his humanity, but his divinity and merging them. Then it shifts to talk about John the Baptist, and talks about there was a man who was sent. His name was John. He came to bear witness to the light. And the light was the life of all human beings. And goes back to the light and how the darkness cannot overcome it, cannot put it out, whatever your version says. That light is love, and it's God's love made real, coming into the world. During Advent, I've been saying this prayer that in response to our offering. It's our prayer of dedication to dedicate our offering. And one of the things I've been saying is asking God to transform these gifts into what the world needs. Love made real. And so my prayer for all of us during this Advent season and beyond, as we receive these gifts of peace, of hope, of joy, and of love in the world, that as we receive them, that we understand that we're blessed in order to be a blessing, and we don't receive them just to take them into ourselves, but in order to have them, to possess them, to then give them out. And the beautiful thing about these gifts, these true gifts, is that the more you give them, the more you have them. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that God's kingdom come? The more you have to get, the more you give, the more you have abundance. And so my prayer is that we do just that we in our lives, through our witness, that we bear witness as we receive and give these true gifts of peace, of hope, of joy, and of love. And as we do, we can rest assured that Christ's light will shine in and through us to the entire world. God bless you and keep you until the next time I see you. Take that light, possess it, and share it with the world. It's what we've called to do, and we are, with God's help, able to do it. God bless you.